Hi, and welcome to the Strength and Honor podcast, where your hosts, coaches Rob Biasotti and Roger Harriet, both of St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, explain how they prepare their teams in becoming champions.
Just wanted to give you guys an update of where we're at with the Raider football team. Right now, we just started week 4 of our off-season conditioning program, and today was the first day that we went into what we call the strength phase. We spent 3 weeks in the stability phase, just getting our players ready from a muscle endurance standpoint, from a connective tissue standpoint. Now, I feel like we're ready to put on some muscle mass and get these guys stronger, headed toward the power phase and headed to spring football. So just to give you some perspective, we got about a 12-week training protocol till we get into spring football, and then from this point until we start in August, we got about 6 months. So the topics I wanted to talk about today were engagement in your off-season program, mechanics, learning, and emotional IQ. And all 4 of those themes play a big part of what we do. It's not just about benching and squatting and program design. Engagement. A couple things have happened over the last couple of days that I thought were pretty cool and pretty indicative of my style anyway for the last 10 years is what I've learned in terms of engaging your players in the workout and getting increased engagement is do the unexpected and don't be afraid to do the ridiculous. And a lot of this stuff pops into my mind organically just when I'm thinking about it or when I get up in the morning or I'm reading something. But on Friday morning at 6 a.m. I was driving into the workouts and I thought about a scene from a Chuck Norris movie called Forced Vengeance. And there's this scene where he's at the bottom of a staircase and he's a dark silhouette and he's protecting 2 damsels in distress, if you will, and he's got a cowboy hat on. The backdrop, you guys can YouTube this, by the way. Just put in there Forced Vengeance, Chuck Norris, and the backdrop is a red billboard and with Chinese letters, and there's this dramatic late 70s, early 80s music coming on, and Kung Fu Master jumps onto the platform, and he has to take his cowboy hat off and go and have a kung fu fight with this Kung Fu Master to see who can win and who's gonna protect the damsels in distress, if you will. So as I drove into the workouts, I thought, it would be great if after attendance we just called on a couple guys to demo, a kung fu experience, even though it doesn't matter if they're, experienced in kung fu or not, just for fun and just to see the reaction. So we did that, and that was pretty cool. It captured everyone's attention. There's a lot of smiles as we had a couple of kids do it. And one of them, you wouldn't know if the kid had been to karate lessons or not. He was pretty good. Well, one of our defensive backs named Zare, one of our leaders on our team. Today, and you have to be careful when you do this. Today, I had one of our linemen. We were introducing the strength phase of our workout, so I put our soft plyo boxes, the boxes that we jump onto, I put them at a ridiculous height. Let's just say they were 5 or 6 feet, and I said, okay, you got to start in a quarter squat and land in a quarter squat, and I gathered the whole team around, and the kid was so enthusiastic that he really attempted to do it, even though there was no possible way he could have done it. And he tried to do it over and over and over again, and the team kept on cheering. And there's a method to this madness, and I call it, increased engagement or total engagement. And what you want is you want your whole team to participate, and it starts with doing the unexpected for a couple minutes or 5 minutes during a 90-minute session, or it starts with doing the ridiculous. You get greater participation. You get inspiration. You never know what you're going to get. So you have people who are very, very curious about what's going to happen. But the bottom line is this is based in science. There's an educational psychologist named Robert Gagné who has these steps to learning. And the number one step is capturing attention. So when you do something like this, when you do a Kung Fu demo with people who have no experience in martial arts, or you set up a scenario where someone has to do something in good, clean fun, like jump on top of a 6-foot plyo box and there's no way anybody can do it, it's going to get the attention of your team, and that's the first step to learning, or the first step to, engaging in a great workout and getting the most or the maximum out of your session. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about And what you might be able to learn from what we do, and I know you guys have different styles, but it's just what we do is, I've been training the Raider football team for 10 years, a decade, or a little bit more than a decade, and we've always had attendance issues. And we'd like to think we're perfect, and we like to think that all of our kids show up to every workout, but that's not a reality, and there's a lot of kids that we have to manage it. And just that process can get really slow if you have 100 kids in the weight room. And you got kids who are doing rugby, wrestling, or running track. So in the last 3 weeks, I've been pretty disappointed with the attendance, and it kind of reached a crescendo this past Thursday. We took attendance, and I decided to put it on the clock. And we did it in 6 minutes, and it's just way too long to do that. So we had these laminated sheets for every group. We have 6 groups, and the laminated sheets have their names on it, and they're supposed to report who's not there to the interns that work for us, and then they send me an attendance report. Again, 6 minutes, ridiculous. So what I did on Friday, I put them on the clock. And I don't know who said this. It was one of those business management gurus. I think it was Jack Welch, and he says, if you want to manage something, it has to be measured, or something to the effect of what gets measured gets managed, or what gets managed gets measured. So I put them on the clock, and I had a little touch of negative reinforcement. And I told them the entire team would be running quarter miles if we don't get it down to 90 seconds. And they did the attendance in 1 minute. So, and then today they did the attendance in about 50 seconds. So I don't know what kind of percentage increase, but it's like 5 times as fast as when we weren't managing it. So again, a little tip about, putting your mechanics or your processes on the clock, and don't be afraid to jump in there. And it might seem like a dirty phrase, but don't be afraid to jump in there and use negative reinforcement. And while I'm on the topic of negative reinforcement is not that bad as long as it's used under a couple conditions. And the first condition I would say with your team is that if you're going to have consequences for doing something, make sure the thing that you're asking them to do is actually achievable. And I know I mentioned that 6-foot plyo box a few minutes ago, but that was just good, clean fun. We weren't going to make anybody have a consequence, or there wasn't going to be a group or team consequence if that offensive lineman didn't land in a quarter squat on top of that plyo box. But if you have something that they can do and they're not doing it, and they're not doing it, it's a goal that can be achieved. And I don't care what it is, from a processes that you have in place, or a process you have in place, or a technique that you've been teaching, then at times, sparingly, if you use negative reinforcement, it can lead to increased motivation. And I think that taking attendance 5 times as fast as we have been is kind of testimony to that. Now, if you do it where the goal is not achievable, or you do it too often, you're going to lead to motivation fatigue, and you're going to lead to players shutting down, and you're going to basically lead to players just accepting the consequence. And then once they do that, they'll come to terms with the consequence. They'll find out the consequence isn't really as bad as what they thought in their mind, and you're not going to motivate one of your players, a group, or a team to do anything you want. So that's my take on negative reinforcement. The bottom line, whether you're coaching the football team during the season or when you're in the off-season conditioning, portion of your season, we are in fact a learning organization, and we are constantly sculpting our workouts, sculpting our processes, sculpting everything, sculpting the way you coach, evaluating to try to figure out how we can do things better. So the quicker you can learn something, the better it's going to be for your players and your team. So there were 2 situations today where we went and demoed exercises in a station, and then when we got into our station and the players went through and did the workout, I was pretty unsatisfied with their performance, especially concerning technique. And the 2 of the exercises I'm referring to are windmills for balance. So essentially, you get in a good athletic stance, and you kind of bend over at the hips, but making sure you have a good neutral spine. And then you get on one leg, and you retract your shoulder blades, extend your arms so you're kind of like an airplane, and then you rotate on one leg to the left at your torso, not with your arms stay stationary, back to the center, and rotate to the right. 16 times. So we had all kinds of guys who when we actually got in our stations and performed the workout, we had guys who were not doing it correctly, who had spines that weren't neutral, who were moving their arms, things along those lines. Another exercise we demoed today that didn't really pass the look test, we got into the workouts, was the split jerk. So what we did at the end of the workouts, and again, you guys can use this, is we used a sprinkling of negative reinforcement, but we did something in terms of the learning that I think accelerated the learning for everybody. We got our groups, we have 6 groups, there's about 20 players in each group. And what we did today is we said, okay, if you don't want a negative consequence, get in your groups. You guys teach each other the windmill and the split jerk. And then after 90 seconds or 2 minutes of teaching, group teaching, send a representative from your group so you guys can perform those movements for the coaches, and the coaches can check off on those movements for that individual. And a beautiful thing happened. Every representative from that group passed. So I don't know, maybe they picked the best representative that was doing it from a superior technical standpoint anyway, but even if that's the case, at least they got 90 seconds or 2 minutes of learning, and at least they have that edge where they don't know if I'm going to call on someone randomly next to perform those movements. So again, a tip for learning in your workouts. And lastly, and I know that some of you signed on to this thing to talk about sets and reps and exercises, and that's a tremendous or a large part of what we do, but that's not all we do. Again, we're trying to get better, and you could have the best exercise and the best program design in the world, but if your players aren't engaged, it doesn't matter. You could have a great facility, but if your mechanics and your process is not tight and you're constantly working to get that better, is it really going to matter? No. So there's a lot of different things that you guys can work on that we're kind of think outside the box or come at your brain sideways. The last thing I want to talk about for the week of February 22nd, or I think it's the 21st today, is emotional IQ and how important that is for your team. And really what you're really doing is you're training them for life after football. But it's so important to football and so important to the workouts. So we do a couple things. Our head coach, Coach Harriet, this year instituted this new practice that when players come into our facility, they have to shake it up. And what that means is they have to greet each other, look each other in the eyes, and just say, hey, what's up? How you doing? Just checking everybody's, just scanning everybody, make sure, just doing what normal people do, in other words. But sometimes when you're 14 to 18, things you otherwise wouldn't do. So we're training them to do that. And something interesting happened today because obviously I've been doing this now for more, in terms of the shake it up, for more than a year now. But after practice today, I must have been, I don't know, probably, 50 players said goodbye to me and came over and made eye contact and said goodbye. And that kind of sticks out, and I'm getting to know them more. And it just does something from a relationship standpoint that we're becoming more connected. And you guys know how important that is for conditioning, for workouts, but you know how important that is to win games, especially when things start getting tough. The other thing that we do is that we have, when we're in our groups, we might just stop the workout and we might just, play this game called Getting to Know You. So I'll stop the workout, get on the clock, and say you have 90 seconds to meet someone in your group that you don't necessarily know well and find out something unique about them that you can share with the rest of the team that will be appropriate but memorable. Make sure you're dealing with teenagers, so it's got to be appropriate but memorable. So we did that today, and it was, that elicited some laughter and some comedy because some kid who you wouldn't think gets in a big truck and goes out mudding. Well, apparently he enjoys that, and then some other kid enjoys romantic comedies. But the point is that they're not telling the coaches that; they're telling their teammates that, and then I will call on a random teammate to say, okay, who'd you meet and what's unique and what's memorable about them. So they have to kind of process it. They have to, engage somebody, process the information, then regurgitate it. And so again, we're trying to build those strong bonds. Tomorrow, our getting to know you phase will be, tell me something appropriate or unique or interesting about, a relative who has a big impact on you, or you can tell a funny story about a relative, and then that story can be relayed through your teammate to one of the coaches. So again, the takeaways tonight: how to increase engagement, mechanics, put things on the clock. What gets if you want to manage something, measure it, or what gets measured gets managed. Again, the idea of how to use negative reinforcement, learning, and I gave an example how you can accelerate learning in your team by actually making them be the teachers. And then, I can't stress this enough, the importance of emotional IQ, or actually team IQ. So again, this is Coach Biasotti signing off. Well, you can watch some of our videos if you go on YouTube and search Alaskan Rob, all one word. A number of our videos will pop up, and so you can see what we're doing. You can follow us on Twitter at Strength and Honor, and we'll be in touch. Have a good week of training.